The crimson glow of Kepler 442b's twin suns cast eerie shadows across the bridge of the Terran warship Vengeance. Captain Sarah Chen stood with her arms crossed, watching the tactical display with the intensity of a predator studying its prey. Her dark eyes reflected the pulsing lights of enemy vessels. Dozens of them, sleek Zephyrian cruisers arranged in perfect formation like silver daggers pointed at humanity's heart. "Captain," Lieutenant Marcus Webb called from his station, his voice tight with barely controlled excitement. "Long-range sensors are picking up the entire Zephyrian Third Fleet. 47 ships, including their flagship Dominator." Sarah's lips curved into a smile that would have made a shark proud.
"Only 47?
Admiral Krex must think we're pushovers." She turned to her tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named Jake Sullivan, who had more scars than a butcher's block. "Jake, remind me again why these purple-skinned peacocks decided to pick a fight with us?" Sullivan's weathered face split into a grin that was all teeth and malice. "Something about humans being primitive warmongers who need to be civilized, ma'am. Our expansion into the outer rim upset their delicate sensibilities."
Civilized.
Sarah rolled the word around her mouth like a bitter pill. "They wiped out Colony 77 Alpha. Vaporized 3 million civilians, including children, and they want to lecture us about civilization." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Every crew member present had lost someone at 77 Alpha. The memory hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. "Captain," Communications Officer Elena Vasquez spoke up, her fingers dancing across her console. "Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship. It's Admiral Krex himself."
"Put him on screen."
"Let's see what this butcher has to say." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the angular features of Admiral Krex. His purple skin gleamed under the artificial lights of his command bridge, and his 4 eyes, arranged in pairs above and below his mouth, regarded the human crew with undisguised contempt. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of assumed superiority. "Captain Chen of the primitive vessel Vengeance. I am Admiral Krex of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. You will surrender immediately and submit to civilized authority. Your species has proven itself incapable of peaceful coexistence." Sarah stepped forward, her posture relaxed but her eyes burning with controlled fury. "Admiral Krex. You know, I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since you decided to murder 3 million of my people. Tell me something, do you sleep well at night, or do the screams of children keep you awake?" Krex's 4 eyes narrowed simultaneously, creating an unsettling effect. "Your emotional outbursts prove my point exactly, human. You are ruled by primitive impulses. We brought order to that colony, nothing more."
"Order."
Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "Is that what you call it when you turn families into vapor? When you reduce homes to ash? When you snuff out futures that will never be? Casualties of progress, Captain Chen. Your species will learn to appreciate our guidance, or you will join them in extinction." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah stared at the blank screen for a long moment, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. "Captain," Webb ventured carefully, "orders." Sarah turned to face her crew, and something had changed in her expression. The careful control was still there, but underneath it lurked something primal and dangerous. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to teach Admiral Krex and his civilized friends about the difference between primitive impulses and righteous fury." She moved to her command chair with predatory grace. "Jake, what's our weapons status?" "All systems green, Captain. Plasma cannons charged to full capacity. Torpedo tubes loaded with quantum warheads. Point defense systems online. We're locked and loaded for bear. Elena, open a channel to the fleet." "Channel open, ma'am." Sarah's voice carried across the bridge with crystalline clarity. "This is Captain Chen to all Terran vessels. Today, we face an enemy who believes that might makes right. Who thinks that superior technology gives them the moral authority to commit genocide. They're about to learn that humanity didn't claw its way to the stars by being reasonable." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Every ship, every crew member who died at 77 Alpha is counting on us. We're not just fighting for victory, We're fighting for the right of humanity to exist without bowing to alien masters. All ships, battle formation Omega-7. Let's show these purple-skinned aristocrats what happens when you poke the bear. The tactical display shifted as the human fleet moved into formation. 23 ships against 47, on paper, it looked like suicide. But Sarah had spent years studying Zephyrian tactics, and she knew their weakness. They were technologically superior but tactically predictable. They fought like chess masters, thinking dozens of moves ahead but always following established patterns. Humans, on the other hand, fought like berserkers with brains. Captain Webb reported, "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept. They're maintaining formation Delta Prime, just like the tactical manuals predicted."
Of course they are. They're civilized.
Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Jake, prepare to execute Protocol Crazy, Ivan on my mark." Sullivan's grin widened. Protocol Crazy, Ivan was something the Terran fleet had developed after studying dozens of Zephyrian engagements. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and completely insane by conventional standards. In other words, it was perfectly human. "Elena, record a message for Admiral Krex. I want him to receive it right as we engage." "Recording, Captain." Sarah leaned back in her chair, her voice taking on a conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than any battle cry. "Admiral Krex, you made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that because we're emotional, we're weak. Because we're chaotic, we're ineffective. Because we refuse to be civilized according to your standards, we're inferior." The first Zephyrian shots lit up the darkness, brilliant beams of energy that could slice through a moon. The human fleet scattered like leaves in a hurricane, their formation dissolving into apparent chaos. "You see, Admiral, there's something you don't understand about humans. When you hurt us, when you kill our children, when you threaten our very existence, we don't just get angry. We get creative. And creativity, my purple friend, is humanity's true superpower." The Vengeance rolled and dove, its hull screaming under the stress as Sarah pushed the ship beyond its recommended limits. Around them, the rest of the human fleet was doing the same thing, each ship following its own seemingly random pattern, avoiding the precisely calculated Zephyrian fire lanes. "Protocol Crazy Ivan, execute."
Sarah barked.
What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The scattered human ships suddenly reversed course, their chaotic movements revealing themselves to be part of a larger, impossible pattern. Like iron filings drawn to a magnet, they converged on the Zephyrian formation from 17 different vectors simultaneously. "Impossible," came Krex's voice over the comm, his usual composure cracking. "No tactical computer could calculate those flight paths." Sarah laughed, a sound filled with dark amusement. "That's your first mistake, Admiral. We didn't use computers. We used something far more dangerous, human instinct guided by rage." The Vengeance screamed past a Zephyrian cruiser, its plasma cannons painting the enemy hull with devastating fire. The alien ship's shields flared and died, and secondary explosions bloomed along its flanks like deadly flowers. "Jake, target their command ship. I want Krex to watch his perfect formation crumble before we send him to join his victims."
"Aye, Captain."
Quantum torpedoes armed and ready. But the Zephyrians weren't finished. Their superior technology began to tell as they adapted to the human tactics. Energy beams lanced through space with increasing accuracy, and the human formation began to take casualties.
"Captain."
Webb shouted over the sound of hull breaches sealing themselves. "We've lost the Defiant and the Retribution. The Zephyrians are compensating for our tactics." Sarah's expression never changed, but her voice carried a note of grim satisfaction.
"Perfect.
Jake, implement the Kowalski maneuver." Sullivan's hands flew over his controls, his face splitting into a grin that belonged in a madhouse. "Kowalski maneuver, armed and ready, Captain. God help us all." The Kowalski maneuver was named after Lieutenant Commander Tom Kowalski, who had developed it during a particularly creative bout of insomnia. It violated at least 17 regulations regarding ship safety and had never been tested in actual combat. It was also completely, utterly insane. "Admiral Krex," Sarah said into the comm, her voice carrying across the battle like a death sentence. You wanted to see primitive impulses? Let me show you what happens when human engineering meets human desperation. The Vengeance suddenly cut all power to its engines and defensive systems, channeling every erg of energy into its forward plasma cannons. For a moment, it hung in space like a sitting duck, an easy target for the Zephyrian guns. Then it fired. The energy beam that erupted from the Vengeance was unlike anything seen in modern warfare. It was a concentrated lance of starfire that turned space itself into a weapon. The beam punched through 3 Zephyrian ships before finally dissipating, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas where proud vessels had been moments before. The silence that followed was deafening. Incredible, came Krex's voice, and for the first time, it carried a note of respect. You sacrificed your defenses for a single devastating attack. No rational tactical doctrine would recommend such a maneuver. Sarah's smile was cold as the void between stars. Rationality is overrated, Admiral. Sometimes the universe requires a touch of madness to set things right. But the gamble had cost them. The Vengeance hung defenseless in space, its shields down and its engines offline. Around them, the remaining Zephyrian ships were closing in like wolves scenting wounded prey. Captain, Webb's voice was tight with fear, all systems are down. We're dead in the water. Sarah stood from her command chair, her eyes fixed on the tactical display where dozens of enemy ships converged on their position.
Not dead, Lieutenant.
Just getting started. The Vengeance drifted through space like a wounded beast, her hull scarred and smoking, her proud guns silent. Around her, 43 Zephyrian warships closed in like predators sensing the kill. On the bridge, emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow that matched the fury burning in Captain Sarah Chen's eyes. Captain, Elena Vasquez whispered, her fingers trembling over her dead console, incoming transmission from Admiral Krex. He's demanding our surrender. Sarah's laugh echoed through the damaged bridge like the sound of breaking glass.
Put him through, Elena.
Let's hear what our civilized friend has to say. Krex's purple face filled the cracked viewscreen, his 4 eyes gleaming with what might have been satisfaction. Captain Chen, your vessel is disabled and surrounded. Surrender now, and I promise your crew will be treated according to the Geneva Conventions. The Geneva Conventions? Sarah stepped closer to the screen, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a roar. You mean the same conventions you followed when you vaporized 3 million civilians? When you turned children into ash and called it progress? The alien admiral's expression hardened.
That was different. This is war, Captain.
Civilized war, with rules and protocols. Surrender, and live to see another day.
Rules.
Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut a diamond. You want to talk about rules, Admiral? Let me tell you about human rules. Rule number 1. Never start a fight with someone who has nothing left to lose. Rule number 2. When someone murders your family, you don't just get even, you make sure they never threaten anyone else's family again. She turned to Jake Sullivan, who was hunched over his tactical station like a monk at prayer. Jake, how long until the beast is ready? Sullivan's scarred face split into a grin that belonged in nightmares.
90 seconds, Captain.
The reactor core is singing like an angel and burning like hell. Krex's 4 eyes narrowed in confusion.
Beast? What are you talking about, human?
Your ship is powerless.
Your weapons are offline.
What possible threat could you? You see, Admiral, Sarah interrupted, settling back into her command chair with the casual grace of someone who had already accepted death, there's something about human warships that your intelligence reports probably didn't mention. Something we've kept very, very quiet. The lights on the bridge flickered once, twice, then stabilized at a brighter level than before. Deep in the bowels of the ship, something that had been sleeping for 2 years began to stir. Every human warship carries a little secret, Krex. A final solution that we pray we'll never have to use. We call it the Beast Protocol, and it's based on a very simple human philosophy. If we're going down, we're taking as many of you bastards with us as possible. Impossible, Krex snarled, but Sarah could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. Our sensors show no energy buildup. No weapon signatures. You're bluffing. Jake, status report.
60 seconds, Captain.
Core temperature is approaching fusion threshold. The beast is waking up, and she is not happy. Lieutenant Webb looked up from his sensor station, his young face pale but determined. Captain, Zephyrian ships are moving to firing positions. They're targeting our reactor core directly. Sarah's laugh was cold as the space between stars.
Too late, Admiral.
You had your chance to be civilized. Now you get to see what happens when humans stop pretending to be something they're not. The ship shuddered, a deep vibration that seemed to come from its very bones. Throughout the vessel, systems that had been dormant for years began to come online. In engineering, Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos watched her instruments with a mixture of awe and terror. "Mother of God," she whispered into her comm, "the beast is beautiful." On the bridge, Sarah stood and straightened her uniform with the careful precision of someone preparing for a formal occasion. "Admiral Krex, allow me to introduce you to humanity's greatest achievement. Not our art, not our music, not our literature, though those are lovely. No, our greatest achievement is our ability to take the worst day of our lives and turn it into the worst day of someone else's life." 30 seconds, Captain, Sullivan reported, his voice steady as a rock. "All systems nominal. The beast is ready to hunt." The Zephyrian formation opened fire, dozens of energy beams converging on the Vengeance like the fingers of an angry god. They struck the human ship's hull with the force of small suns, boring through armor plating and secondary systems with surgical precision. And the Vengeance absorbed every single shot.
"What?"
Krex's voice cracked like breaking crystal.
"That's impossible."
"Our weapons are striking your hull directly." "Oh, they are," Sarah agreed pleasantly. "And we're using every single erg of that energy to feed the beast. You see, Admiral, the beast protocol doesn't just use our reactor, it uses everything. Every shot you fire at us, every photon of energy you waste trying to kill us, it all goes into the pot." The ship's hull began to glow, a soft blue radiance that pulsed in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat. Inside the reactor core, matter and energy danced together in patterns that would have made Einstein weep with joy.
15 seconds, Captain.
The beast is ready to be unleashed. Sarah raised her hand like a conductor preparing for the crescendo of a lifetime. Around them, space itself seemed to hold its breath. "Admiral Krex, you asked me once about human emotions.
About our primitive impulses.
Let me tell you about the most human emotion of all. The absolute, unshakable conviction that some things are worth dying for. And that some enemies are worth taking to hell with you."
10 seconds.
You murdered our children, Krex. You called it progress. You killed our innocence and called it civilization. You picked a fight with a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war, and you thought your superior technology would save you. 5 seconds. You forgot the most important lesson in the universe, Admiral. It's not the size of the gun that matters, it's the willingness of the person holding it to pull the trigger.
3, 2, 1.
Captain, the beast is awake. Sarah brought her hand down like a blade.
Unleash hell.
What happened next defied every known law of physics and several that hadn't been discovered yet. The Vengeance didn't explode, it transformed. The accumulated energy of 100 direct hits, combined with the ship's reactor output and something the human scientists called applied hatred, erupted outward in a sphere of pure annihilation. It wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. It was a localized apocalypse, a pocket of concentrated death that expanded at 90% of light speed. The first Zephyrian ships to be touched by it simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered to the cosmic wind. Admiral Krex had time for exactly one transmission before his flagship was consumed.
This is impossible.
You're violating the fundamental laws of. The transmission cut off as the Dominator vanished into component particles. But the beast wasn't finished. It continued to expand, consuming ship after ship with impartial hunger. The perfect Zephyrian formation, maintained for centuries according to classical tactical doctrine, became its greatest weakness as the expanding sphere of destruction caught them in neat, ordered rows. In 47.3 seconds, 43 enemy warships became clouds of ionized gas. The silence that followed was absolute. Deep in the heart of the Vengeance, now drifting as a hollow shell in the void, a single emergency beacon activated. Its message was brief and to the point: mission accomplished. Colony 77 Alpha is avenged. Tell Admiral Brooks that the Beast Protocol works as advertised. Tell him the price was worth paying. 3 days later, rescue ships from the Terran fleet arrived at the coordinates. They found no trace of the Zephyrian Third Fleet, nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas that would take centuries to dissipate. At the center of the destruction, they found the Vengeance. The ship was a hollow shell, her crew compartments scoured clean by the very energies they had unleashed. But in the captain's quarters, searchers found a handwritten note tucked into Sarah Chen's log. To whoever finds this record, we did what we had to do. The Zephyrians thought they could terrorize humanity into submission by murdering our children. They learned today that humanity doesn't submit. We adapt, we overcome, and we exact a price that makes our enemies think twice before threatening us again. The Beast Protocol is now proven in combat. Use it wisely. Use it sparingly. But when the time comes, when some alien bastard thinks they can push us around because they have better technology, remember that humans don't fight fair.
We fight to win.
We fight with everything we have, everything we are, and everything we're willing to sacrifice. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us dangerous. Captain Sarah Chen, Commanding Officer, TDS Vengeance.
End of log.
6 months later, the Zephyrian Empire sent a formal surrender to the Terran Federation. The message was brief: we were wrong about humanity. We wish to negotiate terms for peaceful coexistence. The Terran response was even briefer: accepted. But remember, we have more beasts sleeping in the dark, waiting for someone else to make the same mistake you did. The Zephyrians remembered. In the years that followed, the Battle of Kepler 442b became legend. Alien species across the galaxy learned the same lesson that Admiral Krex had learned too late: never back a human into a corner unless you're prepared to deal with the consequences. Because humans don't just fight with weapons, they fight with their hearts, their souls, and their absolute refusal to go quietly into the night. They fight with the fury of a species that clawed its way from caves to starships, that survived ice ages and plagues and wars and apocalypses by being too stubborn to die. And when pushed to the brink, they fight with beasts that turn their enemies' strength against them and exact a price so terrible that the survivors spend centuries telling stories about what happens when you make humanity truly angry. The universe learned to leave humanity alone. It was a lesson written in stardust and paid for in blood, but it was a lesson that stuck. After all, there are worse things in the cosmos than death. There's making an enemy of a species that perfected revenge as an art form. The Zephyrians learned that lesson the hard way. The rest of the galaxy learned it from their example. And in the cold depths of space, more beasts sleep in the hulls of human warships, waiting patiently for the next fool who thinks they can terrorize humanity into submission. They're still waiting. And they always will be.